What does fame do to people if they don't learn to manage it and have some type of spiritual guidance or some type of higher truth? What does it do to people, and how have you learned to manage it at this level from all the different stages you've gone through it?
Fame kind of mimics deeper forms of greatness. Fame can feel like being like, whenever you think of, like, say, even a few hundred years ago, or even, you know, like, say, Oscar Wilde was kind of like a celebrity and like a legit genius and wit, and in much of his writing, in particular his writing for children, he's talking about divinity and the sublime and sort of beautiful things. And even with his sort of talk about aesthetics and, you know, being sort of frivolous and glib, he's sort of commenting on his culture's infatuation with superficiality and beauty detached from divinity. Or a figure like Byron, who was sort of like a great celebrity of his age, was like potently connected to the forces and powers of nature, both inner and outer. Fame now is, you know, speaking generally, an extension of commerce. An extension of commerce. I'm not saying there aren't famous people that are great. There plainly are. Greatness can be an inadvertent factor within fame, but it is not a defining one any longer, because greatness so frequently comes at a price. You know, that a lot of people in like a corporate and commercial industries don't necessarily want to pay. And look, from like speaking personally, the reason I wanted to be famous was because I felt insufficient and inadequate as I was. And who knows what choices I would have made if I'd have had access to spiritual principles as a child and as a young man. If people said, look, there's something in you that you've got gifts and stuff, why don't you explore those gifts in this direction? You know, so I just naturally, because in the absence of that, I took the gifts in the dominant direction of our culture. The magnetism of our culture is, you know, if you come from where I come from, Grays, Essex, sort of ordinary suburban town, half an hour outside of London, low expectation, beautiful, incredible people. I realise that now that I've gone back there and visited it. I couldn't see that then because I was too solipsistic and lost in myself and my ambition and my hunger, my drive, my appetites. I've got big appetites, drive, you know, like, and for me, what I was kind of told, look, at my school, if you're not good at football or fighting, you're nothing. And like, and in the culture at large, if you don't get yourself some power, you're going to get crushed. You're getting crushed. You're going to a factory or a call center. You're not, that's what life has in store for you. So, you know, for me, it was the answer. It was the answer to the feeling of inadequacy. It was the answer that my culture offered me. That's what it offers you. It's what it offers all of us. Like, and we're all bombarded with it, but only a few of us are going to get the golden ticket. You know, there's just not enough golden tickets to go around. And those of us that do get it, as Jim Carrey has eloquently articulated, are going to recognize its limitations. You know, we all know there's different category of famous folk. There's people that were, you know, kind of like I was for a while, that just sort of face first thrust into it and sort of think, what is this? What is this? I'm going to experience this, like a gargantuan appetite, like a stomach on legs. And then there are other people that are like, you know, that sort of seem a bit more circumspect. Like, okay, this is crazy. I'm just going to focus on the work. Now, I'm lucky that I'm at heart a comedian, and I love comedy. And as I've gotten older, I've realised that there's the divinity in comedy. That comedy is about revelation. That comedy requires that you observe that life is a joke. Life is a joke. None of this is real. Here I am pretending to be me. You're pretending to be you. We've all got our insecurities and our inadequacies. We know the things we've done. We know the mistakes we've made. We know what we do in the bathroom. We know what we do when we're alone. We know the sort of weird things we've said to people. And, you know, like all of this stuff. And we put on this mask and this facade. Fame merely being an amplification of that. Fame mimics greatness. Fame is bolted on to greatness. A friend of mine said, even in your pursuit of fame, it was obvious that what you were after was God, was a kind of like, but the culture doesn't know how to give you God. The culture doesn't want to give you God. The culture doesn't, and what I mean by God, I talk now, mate, about Sesame Street values. Sesame Street values. This is nothing complicated. Kindness. Be kind to each other. If you're kind to each other, everything else is gonna melt away. You're like that takes care of. Don't judge people for being different. Don't judge people. That all goes out the window. Just if you devote yourself to the simple principle of kindness. The idea of God for me is the same idea as love. That there is a magnetism towards one another. Yes, there is a revulsion, a repulsion, a competition. There is, everything has its shadow. Everything has its opposite and beyond opposites, I'm sure. But there is also love. There is this sense, by love, I mean, and etymologists who studied the word love in many languages posit that what we actually mean is union, connection. I love you. I want to be connected to you. I love these shoes. I've got to have them. I love West Ham United. I want them to do well as I would do well myself. You know, love, of course, can get confused and intermingled with lust, control, need for approval. All sorts of things can get intermixed with love. But you will know love when you are willing to sacrifice, when you see it as something you serve as opposed to something that serves you. This is like, I'm married, and sometimes I think with my wife, that my love is about, I want her to take care of me. And I recognize, hold on a minute, that's not love. That's my codependency. That's my neediness. That's the part of me that's still a wounded little boy. But the man in me has to take care of this wounded little boy, not invite or require that other people do it. Love is when I'm willing to just, again, Sesame Street values. When I'm like, I love you. What you want is more important than what I want. I can't live to those values every day, or even all day for one day. I fall short all the time, Lewis. I like it becomes about me and what I want and what I care about, and and because. Again, many of us are unboundaried and we don't have enough. This is why what you are doing with your School of Greatness is important, because we don't have enough clear, simple principles that seem universal and perennial, i.e. applicable everywhere and timeless. Applicable everywhere and timeless. I know we're all different. I know we are diverse. I know we are unique. But most of us have a heart, lungs, kidneys, blood, eyes. Most of us breathe. So is it not likely that there is a kind of universal application on a more sublime level also? That if we are the same organically, is it not likely that the energies from which these organs must surely have evolved are similar to, possibly even one, possibly even the same energy? That the same way as we know that we come from a common ancestor, that we come from a common energy with a common heart, that our unity is more true than our separation. As the great Terence McKenna says, when the water of illusion drains away, we see that we are all connected. We are all connected.
100%. And you talked about healing the childhood wound, feeling inadequate, feeling insecure, feeling not enough, or all these feelings on your kind of search or yearning for fame, and what does this experience look like, this drive to be more connected to love, to God, to that higher thing. When did you feel in your life the most insecure? And when did you fully start to understand how to overcome your insecurities?
Many of these negative emotions and feelings have like a wisdom in them, don't they? Because even the most ferocious forms of chemical dependency that I've experienced, crack and heroin addiction, are kind of about melting the boundary of who you are. Look at the idioms around it. Get off your face, get smashed, destroy yourself. That on some level, again, using inappropriate means, you are trying to transcend and become free of the self. It's a spiritual impulse. I may have to talk people through that more slowly, because it seems sort of stupid to think of some hunched, drunk or junkie slumped in a doorway as being on a spiritual quest. But when you think that spirituality is simply the valorizing of the inner life over the outer life, the need to connect, the need to feel something truthful and real, then anyone that picks up a drink ever or smokes a joint is after a spiritual experience. They're trying to feel better. Man, I felt insecure and worthless a lot of times in my life. It happens to me again and again and again. I'm lucky that I'm an addict, because the addiction shows you, it takes you to extremes, so you're confronted with the fallibility of the choices you're making, that these choices won't work for you. I think a lot of people, and I wrote about that, in like the recovery book, are able to struggle along with moderate addictions to food or sex or success or whatever, never ever reaching the point of crisis that would facilitate transformation, metamorphosis, real change. That book Revelation I'm telling you about, and that moment that you talked about, going down to that place in Skid Row, the Union Mission, I was doing a craft thing there with my wife. My wife does crafts and writes about craft and like creativity in parenting and in mental health and stuff like that. So we went down there. So I was very much just in an assistant role. The first time I went there, yes, it was to talk to them kids, and I felt like I didn't feel qualified and I didn't feel good enough to do it. I felt somewhat ashamed. I felt ashamed of like I think I said in Revelation, like about, if you're talking to homeless kids on some level, like, because this Union Mission, it's the only one of them missions that takes families. That's what it is. The others take either men or women or adults or whatever. This one takes whole families. There's a lot of people in there, more than there should be in any civilized nation. And like, when you're there, you want to tell them, look, this isn't your fault. It's not your family's fault. You're a byproduct of a economic system that simply cannot generate, it can generate enough wealth, but it doesn't distribute wealth fairly for a number of complex reasons. And you at the arse end of that, and I can't explain that to them. It's patronising and somehow dismissive. But more importantly, that day that I went to do the craft, I sort of saw, or maybe even someone told me it. Maybe I didn't have this realization. Maybe someone said it to me. They don't know they're poor. They don't have that contextualization. They're just children. And it was sort of beautiful and amazing. And since having kids, as I said, I don't do what I used to do a lot. I love children. I've always loved children. I used to get right, and I didn't have kids till like I was 40. So I was very much like, if I was around my mates' kids or whatever, I'd really play with them and like get into characters with them and do a lot of joyful play. And now I've got kids. I can't be bothered with that. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I'm not interested. But that day, like, I held it down because my wife was doing this stuff with the mums and the kids, and I felt the heaviness and I felt the shame of the adults, and I was lifted by the joy of the children. But I held back, like I was just helping them. They were making Play-Doh together and all this kind of stuff and doing these craft activities. And then when that finished, I let myself off the hook a little bit. I let myself be a dinosaur and a monster and be all crazy with these kids and monkey around with them, And like there's one bit where like all these little 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, they pulled me to the ground and they was beating me up and stuff. And I sort of looked up for a moment, and all I could see, my whole vista was filled with children's faces, and they were smiling and they were full of joy. And this is when I felt God is here. God is in this room. Look at this. There's nothing but joy and love and play and happiness in this lowest of place where people are suffering, poverty, being disregarded, neglected, and the whole room, my whole experience is filled with love. And this is just one moment in time. Of course, I know that those children have got whole lives ahead of them and have whole lives behind them. But in that moment, there was an absolute realization of something sublime and divine. And for me, this is an important force, an important energy that has to be mobilized, valorized, brought to the forefront, exalted in our culture, made the emblem and the driving force and the raison d'etre of the way we live, not marginalised, neglected to the sidelines so people can plunder the earth and look at the earth as a resource and look at human beings as a resource and fortify systems of elitism. For me, the basic idea, the Sesame Street values, kindness and love, instead of the values that currently dominate, selfishness, greed.
Right.
This is what's at play now.
The first way you understand a terrible thing is by freezing in terror or running. It's not conceptual, it's embodied and emotional. So event terror, that's the first category. Okay, now the next question is, how do you get it out? How do you get out of the terror?